Es war ein stilles Überholmanöver. Den wenigsten internationalen Medien war es auch nur eine Meldung wert. Ende 2022 zog Indien, gemessen an der Wirtschaftskraft, an seiner ehemaligen Kolonialmacht Großbritannien vorbei und wurde damit zur 5. größten Volkswirtschaft der Welt. Und mindestens genauso wichtig, 2023 hat Indien China als bevölkerungsreichste Nation der Erde überholt. In den deutschen Medien, vor allem in den neuen unabhängigen Medien, kommt Indien dennoch relativ selten vor. Es gibt ein Buch über Indien, das 2023 im Westend Verlag erschien, Neue Welt macht Indien von Oliver Scholz, das spannende Einblicke gibt. Doch noch spannender ist es, mit jemandem aus Indien selbst zu sprechen, und deshalb freue ich mich besonders über unseren heutigen Gast, Indra Shekhar Singh. Er ist Agrarpolitik, Analyst und Journalist aus Neu-Delhi. Und ab jetzt rede ich auf Englisch weiter, um Indra zu seinem Land zu befragen. Welcome to a Manova talk. Thank you so much for taking the time, Indra.
Thank you for having me on your show.
You are an independent agricultural policy analyst and author based in New Delhi. You also traveled to hundreds of villages across India and worked with farmers on regenerative agriculture and food sovereignty. So you are not the typical journalist, modern journalist that works and researches on the internet. You go on the ground. And could you tell us a little bit more about your background so the German audience can get to know you a little bit?
Sure. First of all, a big thank you to you and to the Manova team for having me on the show. It's a deep honor. And I would begin by saying that I'm an accidental journalist and a passionate one. And that's why I'm like the old schoolers, where we actually think of going to places and then reporting on it. But I was not doing that always. I was also the director for the National Seed Association of India, taking care of policy and outreach, and what this organization did was, and still does, is organize seed legislation, everything to do with seed in India. We play a very integral part in deciding government policy. And also, while I was working there, we tried to prevent the entry of Monsanto and Bayer and their monopolies onto the Indian seed sector. Before that, I worked with Vandana Shiva as her campaign manager and media spokesperson. And she's also mentored me in my early 20s. So she's actually taught me a lot about regenerative agriculture. And I would like to just mention this, that my principal work back then was actually the resistance of genetically modified seeds making entries into India. So I've organized, let's just say, with Dr. Shiva, millions of Indian farmers actually advocating against Bayer, against Monsanto, and trying to expose the poison cartel that's been created all over the world, and how India actually is being exploited using the same models of oppression. And that is a very important chapter and a very formative chapter of my life also, which I thought deserves mention.
Yes, thank you so much. And you also work with another famous ecological leader, Dr. Rajendra Singh.
Absolutely. Currently, I'm also, after spending at least a decade in agriculture, I've realized that we must understand water to understand agriculture better. And that's when I began work with my second mentor, Rajendra Singh, who's also known as the Waterman of India, and he's won the Stockholm Water Prize, which is akin to the Nobel Prize, and in fact is the Nobel Prize for water around the world. And I've had the opportunity and the honor of actually working with the water warriors in various villages across the country, and seeing how they are using traditional knowledge and indigenous knowledge systems to conserve water and also regenerate water in their villages, and how, the sacred matrix can actually be seen, the matrix of peace can actually be seen when water returns to a place. How does it really transform a violent society, or a society that's plagued by drug addiction, crime, and other factors, transform itself into a peaceful agrarian community once again? So that's my current work. I can't say that, it's been only 4 years since I've been working with Rajendra, 5 years. So there's still a lot more to learn. And yeah, that's, I guess, a good summary of it.
Yes, thank you. And you also travel from time to time. You are in India, you travel across India, but you have also got an insight, like, for example, in the United States and agricultural policies over there. And sometimes you also travel to Europe, so you have different perspectives. Also, you got to know people from different countries.
Yes, I would. I was also teaching a little for helping research students in American universities about Indo-US agro-diplomacy and how US agriculture in terms of policy has impacted India, but also looking back into their own traditions of the settler culture of America, how land was preserved, how ecologically it's happened. Like, I've spent time around in over, I think, 15 states of America trying to understand how agriculture is, how rural people are, because it's kind of a foresight, because in today's time and age, America is the new Rome. And whether we like it or we don't, most countries are actually somehow very dependent on this new Rome, on this new empire, the empire of the free world, let's just say. And we have to see how farmers are treated in that country to understand what may happen with farmers in my country. But it's not all bad. I saw a lot of hope when I was traveling in America, that how there are people who are returning back to the old ways, to the ecological way. They are actually, there's a big movement in regenerative agriculture in America. And I was glad, once again, very honored to break bread with those farmers, live in their houses, and actually understand a thing or two about agriculture more than I knew before. So it is, that's been my work also in America.
And you also know some things about policy. You are very active also in India. You write articles, from my perspective, criticizing a lot your government. We talk about that later. Because first, I would like you to...
I would just make a correction. I'll just jump in there and say it's not,
Yes.
I'm not writing just anti-governmental stuff, because that's not my intention or never my drive. My real drive is to expose injustices. It doesn't matter who commits them. Till the time injustices are happening, my duty as a journalist and as a person who wants to do some good in the world is to expose it. So my brethren and my sisters who are farming and who do not have that voice, their voice somehow reaches the people who matter. So it's less anti-governmental work. It's more pro bringing farm voices out. And there have been times, it's not that I've only written anti-government when the government does something right. I have also appreciated the government. But my criticism stems from whenever there is bad policy, irrespective of the political party in India. So it's not, I would just defer on the categorization of my work there.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting and maybe inspiring for journalists all over the world to be more conscious about the purpose of their work. And let's dive into the topic now, because I realized that I'm very ignorant. I don't know anything about India. Now that I read this book, I got a little insight. So I would like you to tell us, what do you think European people know about India? What's their idea of India when you travel, or Western people, maybe also from the United States, but I think you know also some European people.
Mm-hmm.
And does it fit the reality of India?
Wir von Manova wollen den vielen Zumutungen der Politik mit mutiger Aufklärung und lebendigen Debatten begegnen. Wenn Sie etwas für unabhängigen Journalismus übrig haben, bitten wir Sie herzlich um Ihre finanzielle Unterstützung. Vielen Dank.
I would say, the sword cuts both ways, because the medium of that knowledge sharing today, whether for good or for bad, has become the media. And depending on what you consume, you get that side of the picture. No one gets the whole truth, but whichever side you're looking from or tuning in from, you get that truth. And talking about Americans, I think generally there is this whole fascination with India, which has been there since the 1960s and even before that. And now with Netflix and other media and movies. So there is, of course, stereotyping. There are many immigrant Indians who live in America. So that's also played up with a certain stereotype that's prevalent in America. But usually I found people are warm or neutral towards us. There is less hostility that I've experienced traveling in all these places. Of course, there is inherent problems of racism in every country, and even my own. So I'm not going to speak much about that. But wherever I've went, I've received kindness and the kind of knowledge. Again, if you ask me a question, how much do they know about India? Well, I think depending on how much interest you have in India, like in any other thing. But generally, people knew where it was on the map. I think, speaking with enough Americans, at least I was happy to know that they knew where it was on the map, and some basic things about us, like, we are religious people, or sometimes we, comments like yoga. Everyone knows about yoga. There is tantra and some of these topics, and chai. I think no matter where you go in the world, if you have tea, then they know about chai. So of course these stereotypes play out. The Indian movies are deeply appreciated. Like I've met so many people who love Indian movies or who'd like to watch more of them. So overall, there's a general curiosity, definitely. There have been some experts also that I've met along my journey. But there is a deep curiosity that I find, and depending on what strata of society you're from, what economic class, what level of education, that curiosity takes that depth, if that makes any sense.
Yes, but the political, for example, do people talk about politics, geopolitics, and India's role? I never did, and now I was surprised when I read, wow, India is the biggest country in the world. I didn't even know that. Mm-hmm. And such an important economy, I didn't know. And then I realized it's an interesting, and this is what I want to dive in, a very important topic now in Europe is the war in Ukraine and also the sanctions against Russia. And it was interesting for me to read that India did not follow the sanctions against Russia, and that India receives 70% of its weapons from Russia. And at the same time, they also have a relationship with the United States. So can you tell us a little bit about this geopolitical importance of India still being in contact with both
Absolutely.
blocks, let's say it like this?
See, I would begin by saying this, that until the time of John F. Kennedy, India and America were actually pretty close. Let's just say that. But eventually, the next president, they took the side of Pakistan, which is the neighboring country of India, and India is like very favorite neighbor. And in terms of, we've had 3-4 wars, and there's always a terrorist threat and other things, but it's mainly the political masters of both countries who think war is profitable. There's also the occupation of Kashmir. And in all these issues, the US many times sent even their 6th Fleet to bomb India and to attack India during one of the wars in a show of support to Pakistan. But it was Russia who sent their submarines and who always provided India with all the help that we needed in any time of in our, let's just say, our darkest hour. And so that's why the relationship between first the Soviet Union and then Russia is deeply important to Indians. Like, we have grown up on many people would love and tell you quotes from Dostoevsky and Leo Tolstoy and other such Russian writers. So Russia and India are very deep friends. They are very good friends. And at the same time, since the US has moved away from Pakistan, we've also managed to create a very cordial and a good relationship with the United States. Okay? But like we did in the Cold War, we do not want to take any sides. We are here for our own geopolitical interests, and we are going to fulfill those. Now, there was much propaganda. Now that all, the dust has settled, we actually know that the Ukraine war maybe was nothing to do with Ukraine at all. It had its winners, and how do we know this? That the meeting to finish the war is happening in Saudi Arabia right now, and Ukraine is not even invited. It's a conversation between the United States and Russia to settle the Ukraine war. So that should give anybody a clear idea that who was really fighting the war. It was nothing to do with Ukraine. And India understood this point very early on. And that's why we abstained from some of the votes which were cast against Russia. And also, we helped the Russian economy when all the sanctions hit. Like, even today, there were Indian companies that work with Russian companies because we do not leave friends behind. And Russia has been there for us, and we have been with Russia. And we understand that this war, this Ukraine war, was actually a created conflict. which had nothing to do with anything else except for advancing geopolitical hegemony in the world. And we don't want to, India was one of the leaders of the non-alignment movement during the Cold War, which meant that we are on nobody's side. We are non-aligned to any major faction. So we still maintain that stance today. And that's been our geopolitical position for a very, very long time. And thankfully, Indian policymakers, not the politicians, but the people who actually run the show, they've managed to maintain such a good relationship, even between two big hegemons like Russia and the United States, and still let that not affect our relationship with any of these other countries. For example, our relationship with Russia has not hampered our relationship with the United States, and we continue to talk to the world and try and convince other people also that the non-aligned way is the way forward. That is the only peaceful way forward.
And do you perceive the Western politics as arrogant towards India or other countries, like, for example, from the BRICS?
See, it's all geopolitical, like I said, it's geopolitical hegemony that various countries are trying to achieve. Now, one could say in retrospect that since the Trump presidency, where is the talk of the BRICS anymore? There is no BRICS anymore. And this whole BRICS game, I think, was more of also a media spin. India and China are it currently. China occupies extended territory in India, and China won that without firing even a single bullet. During the COVID time, they captured, I think, about 72,000 square kilometers of Indian territory. And so where is the BRICS when two of the major partners are already almost at war with each other? So the notions, I think it was used as a bargaining tool by powers that be to wrestle down Biden. But since Trump has come back in, I don't think so. The BRICS will have any, the BRICS has, the idea itself is highly undermined.
And what's the relationship between Modi government and Trump administration?
I think the relationship is quite clear that one is the one who dictates and the other one who is the one who follows. Because Indian, the Indian state has no power, or at least it has diminishing power with the United States right now. And a good example of that is the United States has already proposed that India lower its agricultural tariffs against US agricultural products. And that's a very good example because that's what the government is trying to do. Imagine if there is dumping of US agricultural produce on Indian farmers and Indian markets, the prices will fall. And with that, millions of people will go out of work because their farms will not be economically profitable anymore. And the Modi government has allowed for this. There is an American trade team that's here right now that's talking about bilateral trading systems, and America is insistent on India allowing American produce in. Now, if those things happen, and I'm sure most likely it will happen, that's again a very significant signaling to the rest of the world that now we've broken through the Indian trade barriers, which can only happen when there is a dominance by one of the trade partners. If America had no dominance over India, why would we play with the lives of our farmers who are now being secured by these tariff systems against American agri-dumping or dumping by other countries of the world to basically dilute and lower the prices in the Indian market? Does that make sense?
Yes. And do farmers then accept it? Because there was also the farmers movement. You reported about it. Mm-hmm. We even translated your articles are published on Manova since August 2023 already. Will maybe the farmers movement then raise again against that so it won't happen?
See, right now the government, that's again a very different tangent altogether, because recently, I think a week ago, on the 21st actually, the government, the state government of where the farmers were encamped, there was a farmers movement 2.0, where some farmers were occupying the roads. This was not such as large as the Delhi movement, but this movement, these farmers were occupying for over a year, these two spots on the Punjab-Haryana border. And the government and the police forces were sent in, and the camps were evicted. So this happened just a few days ago. So I think the might of the farmers also has been crushed because in a violent action, because the government wants to send a clear message. And the message is that we have to now listen to what America is doing. Because if we don't, we will be threatened in a very big way. You have to understand that a lot of the remittances that come from America go to India also. And that helps the Indian economy. A lot of money that is, people are earning in the US, they send it across to their relatives in India to earn and live and other things. Now, if America cracks down on Indian immigration, legal and illegal, that's going to be a big blow to the foreign reserve that's coming from the American economy into the Indian economy. So there are many things at play here. And it's quite a complex situation and also a dynamic situation where parts are moving. America is trying to see that how is it more advantageous for America, and India is trying to think how can we survive in this world of a geopolitical hegemony. So this is going to be a trade-off, and I don't think so India has many cards to play when it comes to a display of power like this by America.
And how do you perceive the role of Europe?
See, apart from business, I don't think so Europe has any role anymore. Germany was one of the rising powers, which was actually destroyed by the Ukraine war. So the US geopolitical strategists destroyed Germany and destroyed Russia with the same stone, and that stone was called Ukraine. So the biggest continental power was completely demolished. Now Britain is already on the American side. America and Britain, I don't think so there's any policy differences or ever that have happened apart from when they were fighting in the after World War II. America and British policies have been quite similar. And we talk about France. I don't think so France has already allied itself with the Modi government. It's talking with Americans. So Europe doesn't really have any say anymore. And in terms of Germany, which is now pushed back maybe 50 or 60 years, it'll take a long time for Germany to recover before Germany can have a say once again in continental politics. So I think Europe is pretty defunct right now, or rather, the teeth of European power has been taken out.
And for me, I have a picture of a huge cultural difference between India and Europe, and that is the people's movements. There's more community building, or still more existing communities in India, for example, from what I understood. Then, for example, in Europe, it's a very individualistic culture. And so it's difficult for the people to understand what could they do, because you said you traveled, or I said you traveled to many different villages. There are people's movements like the water movement from Rajendra Singh. So now that the political importance of Europe is less, do you think European people might wake up and learn to take back responsibilities for their lives and quality of life? Do you think that it's possible from the experience you have with European people?
No, absolutely. I think there is hope in every country. And I think Europe has some work to do to rediscover its roots, which have been in cultures which are also very ancient. They would have to rediscover their own ideas of how tribes were formed. It's not that tribes were were an African or Indian or Amazon patented product. No, there were tribes in Europe also. So you have to understand that what were those processes? How can you reinvent yourself and also take care of the Mother Earth, take care of your own people, your neighbor, and also your family? And I think that exercise, although it's a harder one to do collectively, but that needs to be done. Community forming and that needs to be a new exercise which anybody can do. I think everyone is free to do that. So of course there is hope in Europe. There are many big leaders who have actually planted, great authors, great thinkers who have actually helped movements all over the world. They've given, and for example, one big guy is Karl Marx, a European again, giving the idea of the collective. And I know many people, you may agree with his policies or disagree with his policies, but the thing is, he gave an idea of a collective which is still functional right now. So there are many such things that are going to, happen. And every time we think, when we look deeply at any one of the European cultures, whether it's the German culture, whether it's the Spanish culture, whether it's, Britain itself and other Polish and every culture that you see in Europe, every independent nation, every ethnicity has their own roots, which is very, very special, and they carry with them a very special branch of knowledge. That's why they formed around the idea of their ethnicity. So now the thing is, we just have to reconnect with that root. And once we connect with that root, and I'm telling you, my methods may be very different from yours, but till the time we are trying to follow the same principle of how to indigenize in our own selves, I think there is a great hope for the world, not just for our societies, not just for our friends, but the world at large, and even ecology, even the little beings and the big beings.
So you know quite a lot about Germany. I think you're kind of interested in Germany, how I understood it. Can you tell us more about why do you find Germany so interesting?
See, it's very, actually, I stumbled upon Germany when I was doing research on the Roman Empire. And that's when I started to understand that, wait, look at the roots of colonization. Like, although the words have changed, but the processes have been the same. Now, you may call it whatever, but an apple is an apple wherever you take the apple. Okay, it'll have different names denoting it, but the apple will still remain an apple. So I went down deep in the history of Rome, and then I understood what happened with Europe, what happened with the Gauls, what happened with the Germans, how for 1,000 years their children were stolen and they were taken down to Rome, served in the Roman armies. They were completely Romanized. So that was my interesting point. I was like, okay, wait, let's just understand how this colonization has worked. So then I did a very deep dive in the German tribes, into the German culture, into trying to understand then also Prussia, Bismarck, then of course the Weimar Republic, and then moving forward, and also not just seeing the political side of Germany, but also the cultural side through your authors, through your plays, through your, like Carl Jung, people like Carl Jung who existed as part of the larger German people, and how they saw Germany, about people like Hermann Hesse, how they experienced Germany and what was Germany to them, Heinrich Heine, so these people, they are actually pillars of German culture, at least in terms of the things that they said. They may not have been the most popular people in Germany, but yet their ideas presented the subtle intelligence of the German civilization in the modern times. And that made me understand, after doing a lot of reading, especially around World War I, about the Kaiser, about how the war broke out, I understood that these patterns which existed in Germany maybe 70 years ago, maybe 100 years ago, are now starting to show in India. 350 or maybe 300 years of direct British domination, and then 70 years after independence. If you pick up a book of, for example, The Mass Psychology of Fascism by William Reich, and you read that book, you will understand that it actually verbatim could be applied to a country like India today. So you see, there are patterns which always keep repeating themselves across time. We think that these communal politics or the politics of the other was only in, for example, Nazi Germany, but no. If you look at the Austro-Hungarian Empire and how the policies they practiced when they took control of the Balkan region, which is now modern-day Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, these parts, they followed pretty similar tactics of what is happening in India right now, or what happened in the Weimar Republic in Germany, or what happened in, for example, in modern-day Palestine. So all these things are, everything is linked, and the more you read about it, you understand that we are not actually so different. The other thing which I really liked about the Indian culture and the German culture is also that the German culture was very, very heterogeneous. There were maybe 100 or even more tribes. They were organized in various principalities until there was a big Prussian state which existed. But before that, it was very small, it was very diverse. And that diversity I also found to be in my country. So then it was easier to compare, you could easily keep 1 foot there and 1 foot here. And then the sample will not be so different from each other. It's just those historical processes happened in Germany much before they started to happen in India. But the same methods of oppression, colonization, imperialism, however you want to term this, were applied. And then we could see the historical process of when the seed of colonization was planted, what was the fruit like? And that is a reason for my deep interest in the German state, that how advanced, colonization is, and how does it exhibit itself in a state that's been colonized from the time of the Romans.
And could you tell us what's going on in India today? Because I think lots of German people don't know. This is what surprised me when I read the book of Oliver Schulz. So people can then, to want a deeper dive in, they can read his book. But I would also be interested on your perspective. It's about like the Hindu-nationalist government and violence against Muslim communities, if I understand correctly.
See, of course, there is a rise in communal tensions, and also violence. But the bigger picture is that the word India is right now on a hyper-steroid mode, which is fueling certain crony capitalism. Crony capitalism is that it's kind of when a certain oligarchy is created in India, which are then given economic control of the entire Indian, basically Indian business and Indian governmental business. It's something like there is a select, and this is written about in the foreign press, reported all over, that our Prime Minister has a few friends, let me just say, whose careers and whose wealth and whose everything has increased tremendously in the past 10 years. When you look at the government contracts that are given for various civil works or various construction and infrastructure, you would find their names appearing often. So, apart from the rise in, let's just say, inter-religion conflict, which has happened in the past 10 years, the bigger threat to the Indian economy is this deep hand-in-glove where the government and some members of the industry are milking the Indian state dry, which is then a great substratum, or rather a breeding ground for communal tensions, for, even in time of the Weimar Republic. It's only after the Great Depression we see the rise of the party. And economic destitution and economic troubles actually are the best ground, like I said, for growing all these religious feelings or for all these anti-hate feelings. And I think that's what India is experiencing right now. There is great economic despondency and a great, the dollar is right now, when Narendra Modi came to power, the dollar may be like 50 rupees to a dollar. Today it's almost double of that. Today it's about 86, 85. The petrol prices, which were like 45, have come to like 100 rupees. So all the hyperinflation has happened. There's hyper food inflation. The common people are deeply, deeply, deeply affected, to the point that 800 million people, can you imagine, 800 million people depend on the government because they don't have the means of earning their livelihood. So 800 million people in this country depend on the government for food rations. The government provides 10 days food rations to 800 million people. Now you can imagine the state of economic despondency. And when
this sounds like if it was contradictory to what I read in the introduction, that it's like that the economy is now even bigger than Great Britain's economy, but it's about the inequality in redistribution of the wealth. Like on statistics, India's economy does work well, but it doesn't get to the people. Do I understand correctly, or did it change?
Yes, no, absolutely. You're very correct that there's been a hyper concentration of wealth that's taken place in the past 10 years. Hyper concentration. And another thing is that no matter how big the chicken gets, the profits always go to the chicken owner, right? So no matter how fat the Indian, basically chicken gets, the Indian economy bubble gets, when Indian economic interests are tied in deeply with Wall Street, it's basically going to help and affect Wall Street more if India fattens up economically and then shrinks again and then fattens up again. That's the game of speculation in the stock market and other things. And India plays now a very vital role because our Narendra Modi government actually connected us very intricately to the world economy. When the 2008 recession happened, India escaped it almost untouched because we had a larger cash economy. And our cash to debt ratio was the best in the years of the Great Recession, 2008 onwards. Whereas the world was suffering, India was still surviving and moving forward. But if another crash comes, this will not happen again. Today, our economies are deeply linked with the Western economies and primarily the Wall Street economy. And once that crashes, India will crash. And once that crashes, we will see more violence on the street because people don't know how to channel that anger, that frustration, like they did in 1939.
One question about what is about the military in India? Is there like a obligatory military
No,
service?
no,
No.
no
Sorry.
conscription, no draft.
Sorry?
There's no draft or conscription.
So you didn't go to the army, for example?
No, no.
Do you know people who go to the army? Like who will fight for the state? Like who will defend the state?
See, it's just a job. It's like any other job. You could be patriotic about your job. You could be, I'm passionate about being a journalist. If someone wants to be passionate about being an army man, well, they can be. There's nothing wrong about the army. It's an honorable thing. Like, they've defended our country against various wars. And I know people who've been in the army, who've served as officers in the army. But like I said, it's a job, and it comes with, like, if you do your job well, it comes with a tag of patriotism. But the army is required because we live in a very turmoil-filled world, and I'm glad that India has one of the biggest armies in the world to defend us against especially rising threats like China and Pakistan.
Because in Germany, there's now politicians talking again about draft, and I'm surprised that it's coming back. And I wanted to know how it is in other countries, how it is perceived. Like Indian politics don't need more because the army is working well. Maybe this is the thing.
See, the army is working, and like I said again, the army is still an honorable profession. Of course, it's a very tough one. You have to do things that are way beyond your comfort zone. But some people feel for it, they are called for it. But it's not a compulsory service in India. It's like any other job. You can apply for it, you can get trained in it, and then you can serve the Indian Army, Air Force, or Navy. But it's not a compulsory thing.
And is it well paid?
It's decently paid. Of course, I'm sure the officers and the soldiers can get more money, but as per the standard of living, I think it's a decent income.
Because you also have, when you have then the movements of people now, if like the situation is getting worse and people might want to create again the movements and go to the cities and block the cities, would the army then again push them down, or is it?
See, the army never is called in to suppress these movements. That is done by the police or the paramilitaries. The army is strictly for, in India, the army is strictly for tackling invasions outside and external security. Only in very rare cases is it called in case of national disaster or something where the army is called in. But the Indian state also has the police and then has the paramilitary, which is responsible for dealing with civilian problems and internal security situations. The army in India is only extensively used for external threats.
And do you feel secure being a critical journalist in India?
I guess most days, and most days not, but I don't think about it very much, to tell you very honestly. It's best to keep the tension away that way. But I do know that the people I work for and collaborate with, The Wire, two of the founding editors had the Pegasus software malware put on their phone by the government. So that's the level of intimidation that the government is capable of. And let me just tell the viewers that the German Chancellor, her phone was also basically this malware was detected in her phone also, and the same malware was used by the Indian government on the founding editors of the organization that I work for, The Wire. So that's the level of real-time intimidation that we can see by the government.
And how would you describe the press in India? Is it like diverse or?
No, absolutely not. I think this is the age of dying journalism, and this is the age of barely surviving independent media. And India's, because there's such economic destitution, there are very few chances, and maybe The Wire is one of the few independent media channels that is there in functioning in the country right now. Everything else has been bought by the friends of our Prime Minister, or they have controlling interest in it. It's like a censor system where once you buy out all the media houses, all the news that's coming out is only pro the government. There's no one criticizing the government anymore. And if you're an independent media organization, the government will come at you with everything they have. Like your computers will be taken away, your phones will be confiscated, fake cases will be put on you. If you're lucky, you'll survive. Otherwise, the government or some people, if you're a too aggressive journalist, can actually get you killed. And there are many journalists who die every day while trying to report on critical issues. So India is not a very safe place for journalists anymore.
How do you think it's in Europe? Because actually Manova, it's a similar journalist project to The Wire. Living on donations, you also live on donations, no?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes. Do you have an image of how it is in Europe? Do you know anything about it?
I have a basic understanding, but exactly this, although all the media houses are primarily bought, they represent one ideology or the other. And then there are the few independent media channels that are trying to really break the news for the real news for the people and the world.
And are Indian people aware of it? Because, for example, in Germany or Western people often think in the Western democracies we don't have this kind of problem, that there is still a free press. Do Indian people perceive their press as free?
I don't think so. But I also think that Indian people are more pragmatic and we are less idealistic in terms. We understand that the world is taken over by forces which are not always very benevolent. So we are pragmatic people in that sense. And we understand all things can be bought and sold. So the media is just one other entity that can also be bought and sold.
And coming back to regenerative agriculture, are there, maybe in India, much more people than in Europe that are still living on subsistency, with their own farms, being independent from the state?
Yes, but the state, for example, and I say this as a quick yes, only because of one reason, that India has a lot of people. So probably some of the smaller European countries, that's the number of people in India that are actually just living off their farm. They grow what they eat. They're using their own pesticides, creating their own biopesticides, fertilizers, and they're living completely subsistently. They've lived like that for who knows how many thousands of years, and they will continue to live like that. But of course, faction like capitalism and the products and commercial products are also now trying to penetrate in these areas. But yet, I think there are many communities around in India that have successfully resisted the takeover of their ways of life by another more industrial capitalistic system.
And maybe you can tell us a little bit about this, even when some people were already not living on the agriculture anymore because they had no water anymore, because out of industrial agriculture, the soil was too much overexploited. So there was a huge water problem. And you worked with Rajendra Singh, and you visited the places where the water situation were, the rivers were regenerated. And can you tell us more about what happened to the violence, to crime, and the situation of the people?
So I've been to many such places, and the Rajendra's project actually has revived 23 rivers, created some 14,000 water reservoirs, and recharged 300,000 wells. So the list is endless. But I can tell you one story of this village in Rajasthan, which basically, due to cutting of all trees and water guzzling crops, for example, that came with the Green Revolution, finished up all its water very soon. And then there was the drought and no rain came. Anyways, this is a very dry and rocky area. So people had no means to live. And it was not that they were criminals. They were by choice. They had no other choice but to be criminals. And this is the village of Mathara. And here what the people did is the entire village converted into bandits. They left their houses. They used to live in the jungle or wherever. And they used to loot, basically steal anything they could, kidnap people, do all these things. And it was even the police was scared to enter these places because that was basically bandidos land, bandit land. And but eventually, this is again this is a few years ago, and what happened is that our organization moved in on the invite by one of the wives of the bandit leaders, the head of the gang. His wife came to Rajendra and said, can you bring water to my village? And Rajendra said, why not? So they went back to his village and started the work. Once the first pond was created, you won't believe it. In the whole people, everybody started to create these ponds. Once there was a whole public trust and public movement that, let's get back water. Let's stop the life of criminality. Let's become farmers again. We saw that how with one pond, in the next 5 years, the entire region transformed. All the people that were now running as criminals and killing people or like looting from them, all of them surrendered to the police. They came to the police, they said surrender deal, they signed a surrender deal, they served their time in the prison, they came out and they all became peaceful farmers. And I've met many of them, I've eaten bread with them, and you cannot, by looking at them or talking with them, you can never say that they had a criminal past. They've really transformed themselves, because they were never criminals by choice, you see. They had to become criminals because they had no other means to feed their family, to feed their starving children. But once they had water, all this transformed back into like a healthy life, to an agrarian life, where now they don't need anything from the market. They sell their milk, they are raising cows, they're raising buffaloes. They only need salt sometimes, salt and like maybe sugar from the market. Everything else they manage on their own. So, and this is not just one village. This is the story of hundreds of villages in that area.
Wir hatten jetzt einen Stromausfall, ungefähr eine halbe Stunde bei Indra, aber jetzt sind wir wieder da und ich stelle nochmal die Frage, die ich am Ende gestellt hatte. We were talking about Rajendra Singh's project Tarun Bharat Sangh and the movement that it created all over India to regenerate soils and water situations where people, so farmers, could be self-subsistent.
Reliant, yeah.
And when I first researched this project, I found that it was working with the sustainability goals of the United Nations. And in our newspaper on Manova, we are very critical with the United Nations and above all those sustainability goals. So how do you see those goals? Like what's the relationship or your perspective on United Nations work?
Well, I think it's good that finally they're catching up. Like finally they're at least trying to tell people that, well, you know, all these things are also important. For us, conserving water is not just a social act. It's a religious duty. It's a duty that we owe to other beings, like including the butterflies, to the earthworms, to the cows, and to human beings. So this is not just some Western articulation of a process that's already ongoing for thousands of years. Like you can call it now SDGs or you can call it whatever you want to call it. But in true life, it's the duty that every person has towards their environment and towards Mother Earth is how to help her heal from the excesses that are happening with her. And for example, we have used so much of the earth. We have taken so much from the earth. Is it not our duty to give something back? And saving water and safeguarding water is just the very basic thing which I think should appeal to every person listening and every person in the world. Like, should we not save water and also create more water, help save more water for other beings around us? I think that is just a basic rhythm of the heart. Like, you know, you understand the value of water because you are thirsty and then you want to create water for other people. So I think it's just that, and the UN can now come up and say that, well, now we finally realize the importance of environmental protection, and now we bring about these SDGs, and now after having supported the people who have colonized you, who have tyrannized you, now finally we are coming out and saying that, well, you must also take care of the workers. It's like basically some co-opted worker organization that's now coming and saying you should now fight for workers' rights after there's been a big like attack on the workers. So it comes too late, and it's too little and it comes too late. But at least I'm happy that the UN is finally catching up and is at least in its messaging. It's using some of these terms which the ancient people, which the indigenous people have known to be of prime importance for centuries.
But you think that's a trustworthy organization?
No, it's controlled by the power to be. So if the power to be, maybe it can be a trustworthy organization sometime in the future. But judging just from the current state of things, I don't think so that the UN has any major power.
So for you, it's more important that the content, it raises awareness at least. Even if it's not hypocritical, at least the awareness is risen.
Absolutely. Like, at least there is talk about it. It's like, there's no talk about it. Now, at least people are recognizing that, well, there is a need to address this. So I give credit where credit is due. I'm not saying that the UN is going to be a change-making force in the world. I don't think so. In the current state of things, it can have a lot of power. I don't think so. When UN workers are killed in various countries trying to assist and provide aid. So I don't think so the UN has lost its relevance. But it's good to see that at least they're talking about it. Let's just say that.
But your organization anyways is independent from them. You just like put those goals to show there are like similar goals, but it's independent.
Absolutely. And plus these are just guiding principles. Like they are just trying to say that, well, you know what, in modern industry needs to align to maybe some of these steps moving forward. So it's more like a benign industrial standard. And I think that's what it should be taken as.
Because you're also like what you said in the beginning, like you are not like a anti-government journalist. You are criticizing what needs to be criticized. If the government does something that you find that that can be supported, then you would also work. And it's the same, like more importance on the content than on the who is saying or doing things. No, yes.
See, the optics, I'm not fooled by the optics anymore. That's the thing. And just going back on the UN topic, like, you know, for example, the UN organized the World Water Day, and all the people that funded the World Water Day were the biggest corporations. People who were invited there to speak, you know, they were all corporately aligned. So in certain areas, the UN is not functional, not even effective. When we say, for example, so many people suffering right now in various parts of the world, in geopolitical conflicts, in wars, where is the UN there? You know, so once you, and this is an answer when everybody knows it. When the Nord Stream was bombed, where was the UN then? You know, there are currently, as we speak, there are genocides happening all over the world, in small parts of Africa, in Middle East, in the Near East, and all part of the world. Where is the UN there? So I think that should, just by their actions, we can all understand, make our own understanding. This is not a way to slander the UN, but we need to very effectively and very precisely analyze their efficiency in the world. And if we gauge the UN by this standard of efficiency, that, okay, you want to bring peace to the world, you want to bring goodness to the world, you want to bring dignity to the people. Well, how efficient have you been in bringing that to the people that you say you're bringing it to? I think the answer is not very, and especially in today's context. And I'm not one for ideologies. So if you perform well, I'm going to be supporting you. But if you don't expect me to still pat your back and say that, well, you're doing the right thing, you see.
And in the beginning you said, even if all the devastating news, like the press is having problems in many countries that are still called democracies, and people are suffering, like there's lots of inequality, and still you said in the beginning that you find moments of hope, and it's based on your personal experience. Actually, it's you work with many people in different places of the world, like in the US and in India. So can you tell us a little bit of what you learned working with like farmers movement, with Rajendra Singh's water movement, with maybe also Vandana Shiva? What can German people maybe learn about like hopeful projects that are also existing and that never have a space in the news?
See, I think the point of hope is yourself. And if you're kind to the world in the right sense, you don't have to be, you know, sitting down and taking injustice. Having the will and the courage to fight injustice, and then also not losing your kindness. I think whoever follows this principle, no matter man, woman, whatever you want to be, if you are kind and you have the courage to stand up against injustice, whether it's a school bully or whether it's, you know, against policies of your government or something wrong happening in your neighborhood, I think that's where the real hope comes from. And I've seen this, like even with people with nothing, like you imagine Americans being very rich and prosperous. I've been with people in rural America who are basically the trash of their country. Their government doesn't care about them. They want them gone. There's no support, but they're still fighting. And, you know, there are multiple of these stories hidden, these little sparks of resistance for the right. You know, people have been beaten up, people have been brutalized, yet they don't leave the kindness. They don't leave, you know, the love thy enemy attitude. And that's what really, like, I think changes the world, you know, because love is something, that cornerstone on which the world spins, you know, it's that little point on the world spins. So if you can include a little bit more of your love in your life, for your community, for your enemy, for the person that you hate, for the person you cannot understand, I think the world will already start to get to be a better place. And that may sometimes include reading the newspaper, that you thought you shouldn't ever read, or reading that book or listening to that song that your parents told you not to listen to. Sometimes there is great merit in tasting the forbidden fruit. And I think we should give everybody a chance, and a fair chance, not driven by ideologies. And I think that's the way to break any system of deceit, or to break any system that's trying to oppress you. It's only through personal relationships, personal understanding, putting the effort in to understand. And even when the mind cannot understand, it's always a feeling of the heart that we can always understand what the other person is feeling. And I think that's been a great guiding principle in my life. Of course, there are mental calculations that we all do. But if we get guided by the instincts of our heart, I don't think so we will be fooled. And I don't mean to be sentimental here, but the heart also knows, has its right and has its wrong. We shouldn't be blindly following anything, including a high heart or our mind. But I think if we connect to humans as humans, and not as people of color, not as people of privilege, not as people, all these categories that are there in the world, I think we can bring about a great change. Human to human.
Yeah, thank you for this resume. And are you a typical Indian man? Like you seem to be a little bit spiritual. You're Hinduist, if I understood correctly.
Yes, I was born a Hindu, yes.
Like your attitude, like this wisdom you're sharing with us, come also from your culture, or are you more an exception in India?
I wouldn't say I'm an exception in any way, but this has just been my experience, and I would not like to generalize it to be as an Indian or anything. I'm just me. And what I am quoting is not just from Hindu textures, but also from the Bible. It's also from what Jesus has said. And we understand the deeper we get into our own spirituality, we understand that the voice of any master, whether it be Jesus, whether it be Buddha, whether it be anybody else, they all say the same thing, that the world spins on love, and we must be more kinder, we must be more loving, and we must always fight injustice. I think there is no religion in the world that does not preach this. So whether me being Hindu or not, I think any person who's dug deep within themselves and also seen the suffering of others, I think they will arrive at the same conclusion that I have.
Thank you very much, Indra Shekhar Singh,
Thank you,
our
Elisa.
Manova author from India.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, thank you again for taking your time. Shukriya, you say in
Yes, shukriya.
Shukriya.
Danke. Bitte schön.